Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I am, as ever, regular EV Dad, also known as John, and thank you for joining me in my studio, also known as the corner of Co-Pilot London's bedroom. As ever, if you are a man, this is the only time you'll see this and live. An interesting update for you. So the longer form content's taking a while to come through, just the sheer amount of editing. Just so you know, one day's video in the can from the New York to San Francisco trip is about 3 hours. Editing that down to an hour crazily takes 3.5 hours in its own right. And as you're seeing this, I'm actually changing job in my professional life. So quite a lot been going on this past week. Also, Co-Pilot London's first full week back at school in preschool, and she is loving it. Anyway, you've already read the title, so it's not going to be that much of a surprise. But I thought I'd just go into the reasons why I'm doing this, and just so you see my viewpoint. So, yes, I have put a deposit down on the Ford F150 Lightning. Now, this came as a bit of a surprise. It was one of those purchases that I executed at 2 in the morning, or the order I put down at 2 in the morning. And the reason I did it is because of the weather outside. It is dry. While we've talked about moving out of the Bay Area, I live in the hills of above San Jose. Every year we have fires near where I live. All you need to know is I don't have neighbors, I have dogs. That's it. The consequences of that are that fire is a constant risk. During this, I have a Ford Transit van, which I don't think has been in many videos. But I have a big ass extended wheelbase Transit 350 XLT. Now it's technically a passenger van, but there's no seats in it. That literally sits here on standby to evacuate the dogs and our most necessary possessions, and that will be here until the first week in October as a rule. I rent it out other times of the year, but during the peak fire season, that's how it is. What that also means is that we are subject more often than we'd like to PG&E's, what do they call it? I'm going to call it pragmatic energy cutoffs. Basically, if there's going to be high wind events, and we'll get more of those as we go later into the fire season, they will proactively turn off the power to large areas. And this has been a pain in the butt for the last couple of years. Don't get me wrong, it's worse for the people of Paradise that lost their houses, that forced the creation of this policy. But what it has meant is that we had to look at backup options. Now, my choices in that regard were to install a Powerwall or a non-Tesla version, such as a ENIAC. We already have 10 kilowatts of solar on the roof, which is coming up for 7 years old, and I apologize for the pinging of my phone. That's confirmation that I will be performing this weekend at Tommy T's in Pleasanton. So, hi, buy tickets now. Ignore that. It's 7 years old, and I know we're talking about solar, but this is all connected. Hang in there. Now, because it's 7 years old, it means I've nearly paid for it. It was on a 10-year mortgage. In fact, I could pretty much just finish paying for it right now, but I get a deduction on my taxes because it's classed as a mortgage, and so it's useful in that regard. I want to expand the solar system we have. When we had that solar system, it was just me and my wife. We now have my father-in-law living with us, and of course we have the Munchkin. Not only that, but it's hotter than it was 7 years ago, and so we use air conditioning more than we did. In fact, when it was just the two of us, we wouldn't use the AC that much because obviously we were at work during the day. But now, COVID has changed everything. So that's part of my decision process. When I expand, and I plan to expand the solar system, that will mean either putting in a second inverter or a much bigger inverter. And I already have kind of the biggest one that SMA do, the Sunny Boy 9. But I could do with generating more of my own power. I'm fine with not giving PG&E money. Absolutely fine. And I'd also like the ability to, when we have these power situations, to be off grid for a couple of days without any issue. And that is where the Ford Lightning comes in. Tesla is not a fan, and they've spoken occasionally about it, and something tells me it's a compliance play about doing vehicle to grid and vehicle to home. Ford is actually doing it. I'm not a fan of the Ford Motor Company. I'm not against it. As a European, I love the Ford Focus ST. My God, it's fantastic. And the Mondeo, what I think you would call a Taurus, was one of my first cars back in the UK, like a grown-up car. And I had the sportier version of that. I was raised watching Cosworths, for crying out loud. But I'm not what you call a truck guy. But the practicality works for us and our lifestyle. And this functionality would be very, very useful. Being able to, you essentially you take the 80 amp power system, which you get with the truck, and this has to be the extended battery version, obviously. And you then have 9.6 kilowatts input back into the house. Now you have to have an isolation system so that you can, when the power grid goes down, you make sure you stay down. You don't want to be putting power into the grid. You'll give somebody working on it one hell of a shock. But we were going to do that to put the generator in. You have to disconnect yourself before you can fire up a generator or use your Powerwall or other version. You'll notice I haven't talked about the actual truck bed, and that's kind of unimportant because it'll be used for hauling stuff. It'll be used for hauling trash. It won't be used for dogs. It will do nothing for us as a dog show family because we have a strict policy of not putting crates in the back of the truck. Even if you put a topper on it, in the event of a rollover, everybody dies inside those things. They come off, and it's not good. So it doesn't do anything for us in that regard, but what it does do is it provides an emergency backup generator for the house. And, that was money I was going to spend anyway. And if you look at the amounts, I can get 1/3 off my battery through the solar system, or I can get another $7,500 if it happens in time or whatever the legislation changes happen through my taxes, and keep it for 3 years. So, the trim levels and everything haven't been announced, but it's safe to assume that mine will be the bigger battery with the minimum amount of trim possible, because I'm still value driven, and even my VW ID4 is a semi-agricultural vehicle. I haul hay in that thing a couple of times already. So yeah, that's what's going on. We put in the order. We'll see what happens. And let me just say this, Ford, I've reached out to your head of PR many times to be allowed into your media program so I could download B-roll to insert into this video so that I could, as a media person, have some form of engagement with you, get access to early test drives and things like that. 2 personal emails, 0 response. I appreciate I don't have that many subscribers, but I'm trying to represent regular EV people. Rant over. Hey, it's just a small piece of news. We'll see where this goes. If you have been, thank you so much for watching. Whatever you do, be safe.